Well, good morning and welcome to Sierra Foothills Unitarian Universalists for our service today called What Compassion Looks Like in Public. My name is AJ Van Tyne. I'm the minister of this congregation, and I'm joined for this service by our worship associate and board member, Suzanne Borth, Patty Leftridge, our music director, and Adrian, our director of religious education. And of course, with that crew of worship associate and music director and other staff putting together a service, of course, we would just be here talking to each other if it weren't for all of you. So you are all very welcome here today. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, you are welcome here. In all the ways that you experience and express gender, you are welcome here. In the beauty that is who you love and how you love, you are welcome here. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, you are welcome here. Whether you come feeling whole, feeling broken, or anywhere in between, you are welcome here. With all of your grief, whether personal or for the world, with all of your thirst for justice, with all of your exhaustion at the system, you are welcome here. No matter how long you've been away, nor how soon you may return, you are welcome here. You are invited to join us with an open mind, a loving heart, and helping hands. We welcome you today. I especially welcome any newcomers today. It's certainly always brave to be a newcomer, but even more so in this virtual world we're living in. The virtual services that we have are not so different from our regular services, but instead of coffee hour, we use the breakout session to feature in Zoom to connect and have community and fellowship and conversation in smaller groups. So if you join the service as early as if you join the Zoom room as early as 9:30, you'll be sorted into one of our meet and greet rooms. We also have a room for the children to connect with each other and with our director of religious education, Adrian. And if you're a visitor and you have not done so yet, please fill out the newcomer welcome form, which can be found on the visitor section of the website. Please fill that out. We can find out a little bit more about you. You can find out more about us. And most importantly, you can start receiving our weekly e-beacon emails with all our announcements and upcoming activities and such. And so without further ado, I now invite Suzanne to lead us in lighting our chalices and beginning our worship together.
We light our chalice this morning with these words from the Reverend Erica Hewitt. The chalice, as a symbol of Unitarian Universalism, arose as a beacon of hope in an atmosphere of tyranny. The chalice arose as a sign of promise that the marginalized would neither be forgotten nor ignored, because they are beloved and precious in the eyes of the holy. This morning, we remember all of the people who have been told explicitly or implicitly through police violence or government policy, through derision or dehumanization, that they are anything less than whole, anything less than beloved. As we each light a chalice in our homes, may we make of our lives a beacon, a symbol of our promise to draw the circle wide, a sign that we will not rest until all means all. Please join us in singing hymn 1023, Building Bridges.
I reach reach out to voices and reach out to visions. We'll reach out to voices between our divisions. I reach out to visions. Will you reach out to visions? I'll reach out to voices and reach out to visions. With friends we got voices such and all our visions. Friends we could make such sweet harmony. Friends we could make such sweet harmony.
We'll now be having a process of recognizing and covenanting with some of our newest members. Today, we welcome into our community these new members who have chosen to make a commitment to this congregation and to join us in covenant. Since we are worshiping virtually, we have adapted our process of this covenant. So when asked, I will invite everyone, the whole congregation, to unmute yourselves and respond, "We will," but don't do it yet. First, though, we need to introduce our new members. So I'm going to invite Andrea, Tracy, Jim, and Elisa to unmute themselves and say their name and share.
Okay, I'm here. Tracy's here.
I'm here, Jim.
I'm Andrea, I'm here.
Elisa, I'm here.
Excellent. Can you also share just the rough geography of where you live so that people can have a sense of that?
I live in Auburn by the Forest Hill exit of the freeway.
I live in North Auburn currently on Canal Street.
I live in, I live in Rockland.
And I live in Auburn in Sky Ridge neighborhood behind Sisters of Mercy.
All right. Thank you.
No. Yeah.
So I will now read part of this covenanting process, and I invite the new members to respond, "We will," and then I will address the congregation and ask them to respond likewise. New members, we are so glad to have you here with us and that you have chosen this community of fellow seekers to travel with you on your life's journeys. Will you accept the gifts of fellowship, discovery, and service? Will you offer us your unique presence and gifts? Will you add your name to the long history of Unitarian Universalists who spread hope with our shared faith and our living tradition? Will you engage with us as we seek to create a community and a world dedicated to love and justice?
I will.
We will. I will.
Thank you. Congregation, will you welcome these new members with warmth and comfort of your fellowship? Will you seek to add your strengths and talents to the new gifts that they bring to us? Will you share our triumphs and our struggles as our community grows and changes?
We will.
We will.
Oh,
We will.
We
will.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, we
Beautiful.
will.
John.
I now invite Jim to represent the group of new members and read the new member covenant. Mary, the chair of our membership committee, will respond as a representative of the congregation. Normally we would read these parts in unison, but we're adapting to new technology.
we enter this community with hope and a possibility in our hearts, pledging to participate in and support the ministries of this congregation. We covenant to remain true to the spirit of love that flows through this congregation and guides us. We take your welcome as we join in this faith.
We welcome you as once we were welcomed ourselves in the spirit of openness and inclusivity, respecting your inherent worth and dignity, your ideas and your vision, both in times when it is easy and in times when it is difficult. We ask that you recognize our humanity. We will not always live up to our ideals, and when we fall short, we invite you to stay in relationship with us and help us more fully bring alive the spirit of love. We welcome you as equal members of this congregation, of this faith, and of our shared spiritual journey.
I will now read the mission of this congregation, and when I'm finished, all who agree, please unmute and say, "We covenant." We covenant together to build beloved community that respects diversities as we nourish the spirit, care for the earth, and inspire faithful acts of peace and justice.
We covenant.
Covenant. We covenant.
We covenant.
We covenant.
Covenant.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much, and welcome to our new members.
Yay!
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And we will now transition into our Store for All Ages. So Adrian, let's give you the spotlight and unmute you.
Good morning, everyone. So I would like to try a little more involvement and participation here. There is a little trick with Zoom. If you press the space bar only while you're talking, you will go back on mute when you're done talking. So just press it while you're talking and then lift up. You're back on mute, and that should help us with some of the feedback issues, right? All right.
Works.
Yeah. So if you want to share, go ahead and jump in, say your name, share what you have to share, and then lift your hand off the space bar. So I wanted to talk to us this morning about this symbol. Who knows what this is?
Power.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives
Black
Matter.
Lives Matter. Power. Right.
Power.
It is. This is an image that communicates Black power and Black pride. And today I want to talk about how all of us in this community can relate to expressions of Black power. So here's another picture, and I apologize if it's a little grainy. Who is this and what is she doing?
Is that Beyonce?
That's Beyonce. What's she doing?
She's giving the Black power.
Doing what Beyonce does.
She's doing what Beyonce does. She's given the Black power symbol along with a lot of other dancers. Where is she?
Super Bowl halftime show.
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl halftime show. That's right. All right. Here's another one. Who are these guys? What are they up to?
Olympians.
They are Olympians.
1968 in Mexico.
That's right. This is Tommy Smith and John Carlos at the Mexico Olympics. They're standing on the podium.
Who's the one without her fist up?
That's the second place winner. He's from Australia. He's actually wearing a patch in solidarity with these guys, and he faced a ton of ridicule when he went back to Australia, because if you'll remember, there was huge racial tension there as well. Still is. You'll notice one guy has this arm up and one guy has that arm up. True story. They only had one pair of black gloves, so one of them wore one and the other one wore the other. Ha ha.
Creative thinking.
All right. Last picture. Who are these guys?
Black Panthers.
These guys are
1950s.
Black Panthers. Yes. They've got their fists up too.
My homies from Oakland.
Yeah, from Oakland. Now, I know some of us thought that Black Panther was a superhero movie, which it is, and it's a very good one, but it's also a real political party. As mentioned, it's from Oakland. And they used a raised black fist as a symbol also to communicate Black power and Black pride. Not all people who use black fists are Black Panthers, but a lot of Black Panthers use this symbol, right? So Black Panthers opposed police violence in Black communities and the draft of Black men into the Vietnam War. For those of us who forgot or were not aware, the current protests against police violence are not new in America. They've been going on all the way back to the colonial days. And in the 1960s, it got so bad that the Black Panther political party formed to protect neighborhoods. They also did a lot of other wonderful stuff, but mostly we see pictures of these very militant looking fellows, right? And they were armed. What does armed mean?
Guns.
Had weapons.
They had weapons. That's pretty scary, huh? And that's what I want to talk about, is the scary part.
Well, they were exercising their Second Amendment rights.
Exercising their Second Amendment rights, exactly.
Yeah.
So but I want to talk about that for a minute, because mostly, the public reacts to raised black fists as a scary thing, right? And we need to talk about that, because this is a symbol of resistance and pride. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable because in one gesture, a black person can upend the whole racism of America to assert their voice and their dignity. As Unitarian Universalists, we strongly support each person to express their own unique voice, and we value the worth and dignity of each person. So as an organization, the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UUA, supports Black Lives Matter and expressions of Black power and Black pride. We support this even if it makes us a little uncomfortable. For people of color, it can be uncomfortable to take such a strong stand. When people of color raise their fist, they face a lot of ugly words and actions by society. Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised their fists at the Olympics, opposing racial discrimination in sports. They were expelled from the Olympics and sent home. They barely got to keep their medals. Beyonce made a powerful statement at the Super Bowl, and she was criticized and threatened for it. Black Panthers carried guns in self-defense, but they were labeled as a terrorist organization by the FBI. Did you know that in addition to protecting their neighborhoods and communities, they also started free breakfast programs in low-income neighborhoods and health clinics to treat people in those communities? They even started HIV/AIDS clinics. I mean, these folks were really involved in supporting their communities. So remember that when people of color say they are strong, it's still a dangerous thing to do in our society, whether it was 1966 with the Black Panther movement, or whether it is 2020 in the streets around the United States right now. For people who are not Black, especially for white people, should we raise our fists like this?
No.
Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not. No. The answer is probably not. I'm sure nobody's going to mind if you're at a protest and you get caught up in the moment. But
I disagree because
generally,
we can raise our fists in solidarity to heighten their voices.
And there's this issue of solidarity, right? Technically, this is not our symbol. We're here to cheer on and support the people who do. And if we're in the middle of it, like I said, if we're at a protest and we're just in the moment using our hands to support each other, that's great. But
I would add, if we're specifically invited to, that is a very different context than us just saying, oh, I'm going to show up and raise my fist as the only white person in this context.
Exactly. But we're here definitely to support and defend, right? So we also are here to ask questions. So when we notice people who are uncomfortable with Black people raising their fists with symbols of Black pride and Black power, we can ask questions about, why does that make you uncomfortable? If it makes you uncomfortable, doesn't that say something about how we aren't all equal yet? So we should keep our eyes open for symbols of Black power and Black pride, because these folks are doing some heavy lifting in the fight for racial equality. And as an organization, as human beings and as individuals, we should do our best to support that. So that was our little educational piece for this morning. Thank you all so much. I like having the voices jump in. This is great. New skills. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. So now I'm going to provide a little bit of framing now and then offer more of a homily later, although it all kind of blends together, doesn't it? So we actually planned to have this service, have the topic of this service in the month of compassion be about racial justice well before the recent protests that popped up near the end of May in the wake of the death of George Floyd. And those protests, well, perhaps you've noticed a slowdown in coverage on news or social media, possibly. Make no mistake, the protests are not slowing down or stopping. In fact, they may have a boost in this upcoming week as we near Juneteenth, which Juneteenth is a celebration of the date June 19th, 1865, which is when enslaved people in Texas finally received the news that they were actually freed by the Emancipation Proclamation. And so in practice, they were still enslaved and were not actually freed until 2.5 years after the proclamation was issued, because the news and enforcement by Union soldiers and generals did not reach them until then. Sometimes proclaiming something to be true is not the same as actually making it true. Black Lives Matter. So that was 1865. Were Black people truly freed then? The forces of white supremacy quickly shifted and took the form of Jim Crow laws, so I think not. Yes, later on there was the civil rights movement of the 1960s, 1950s and 60s, and the Black Panther movement, but a lot of that, the progress of that movement was cut short just as it was gathering steam. And whatever progress it made was also met with militarization of police, mass incarceration, and increasing anti-Blackness, which has all gotten worse over the past 50 years. Are Black people free yet? Which is not to even mention or get into the oppression of other non-white folks, and especially what bears mentioning in this overall conversation is the original sin of America, indigenous genocide. There are so many dimensions to racial injustice in our country and our history, but the one at the forefront right now has to do with the extrajudicial murder at the hands of mostly police, but sometimes white vigilantes as well. The deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin. And just this past week, even after 2 full weeks of protests over the very specific issue of police use of force and killing, Rayshard Brooks of Atlanta was shot and killed while he was running away from police. And when these killings are protested, the protests are met with even further police brutality. Police in riot gear, militarized weapons, shooting at protesters with rubber bullets, and, in case you missed it, shooting at journalists and legal observers. Curfews were declared, not because of any danger from the protests, but so that the police would then have a reason to arrest and intimidate the populace. Now, after about a week of the initial upswell of these protests and the police response, the police changed tactics across the nation, and suddenly the protests were perceived as more peaceful. Imagine that. Now, let me be clear. Certainly, an important amount of the rioting and tensions was instigated by police. But much of the rioting was by protesters, and that fact that protesters do riot and loot does nothing to shake my support for those protesters. I want to be very clear about my understanding of Unitarian Universalist values, of at least my personal religious principles. We have 7 UU principles. None of them mention property. The first one does mention the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Death or injury of humans is violence. Destruction of property is not violence. Now, we can get into an argument about semantics and what really is violence and not, but I hope you can hear the distinction that I'm making in this context. As an example, after Rayshard Brooks was killed at near a Wendy's in Atlanta this week, protesters have since set fire to that Wendy's. Now, let me be clear. I believe that what those protesters did was less wrong than a police officer or anyone shooting and killing someone, especially someone running away from them, posing no immediate threat to their safety. I want to be very clear about where my values lie. And all these protests and these riots and these challenging tactics that may make some people feel uncomfortable, they do get results. New York State finally passed a chokehold ban named for Eric Garner, who died 6 years ago. Louisville passed Breonna Taylor's law to ban no-knock warrants, and Minneapolis is replacing its police force with a community-led model. They are actively taking steps to respond to the call to defund police. These reforms give me some hope, although they certainly don't go entirely far enough. What gives me more hope is the widespread endorsement of Black Lives Matter this time, and the consensus that, at least that of thousands of protesters, that real significant change must happen. And most of this, the biggest call for this, is in the form of calls to defund the police. Now, there may have been a lot of conversation. You may have read different opinion pieces or conversations around what that means, but I'm just going to recommend to you the New York Times opinion piece by Mariame Kaba entitled, "Yes, we mean literally abolish the police." In this opinion piece, she succinctly outlines how the history of policing in America is rooted in racism and oppression of the poor, and how centuries of attempts of reform have not yielded significant results. Make no mistake, calls to defund the police are calls for abolition, just as progressives have been calling for the abolition of prisons, just as progressives of the 19th century called for the abolition of slavery. On that note, we can take some pride in our religious history and heritage here. Unitarians and Universalists were leaders on abolition in this time. At least some were. Theodore Parker comes to mind as a Unitarian minister in Boston who, among accomplishments in congregational life and transcendental theology, is known for having kept a gun in his desk because he was sheltering fugitives from the South in his church. He and another Unitarian were part of the Secret Six, the group of Bostonians who funded John Brown in his 1859 raid on Harper's Ferry, which was an important escalation point on the way to the Civil War. But Reverend Parker was ostracized and ousted by the majority of his local Unitarian minister colleagues in Boston. They thought he was causing too much trouble, making too many people uncomfortable. He had too radical politics in his abolitionism. So we can and should rightfully claim pride in our religious forebears, for those that were progressive and revolutionary in their thought, imagining and fighting for a nation without slavery. But we cannot ignore the history that comes along with that of hesitation, the history of lack of imagination, and the history of resistance that did not perhaps age quite as well as the legacy of Theodore Parker, but was perhaps more what the average Unitarian believed and acted upon. And it's not just 19th century history. During the civil rights movement of the 1960s, Unitarian Universalists of both or all races were split on whether to support integrationist policies and movements or Black power, Black empowerment movements within our faith. So funding from the UU Association, from the UUA, to various groups was promised, but then revoked when they experienced a budget shortfall. Tensions climaxed in a walkout during the 1969 General Assembly, the annual gathering of Unitarian Universalists in the nation, and we lost many Black UUs in the wake of what has been called the Black empowerment controversy. Though in recent years, it has been pointed out that it could just as easily be called the white entitlement controversy. And even more recently, in the past few years, there have been events. A month ago, I preached about the top 10 UU moments from the 2010s, and the most important to know was the spring of our awakening in the spring of 2017. You can look at the recording on our website of that service for a little more information there, but in brief, part of the controversy involved our UUA president resigning over a hiring controversy, and concerns about how white supremacy culture operates within our Unitarian Universalist Association. Miraculously, our leadership was able to gather itself and responded better than it did 50 years ago, and not only promised, but made good on a $5.3 million commitment to fund the Black Lives of Unitarian Universalists Collective. And they also, the association, the UUA, launched the Commission on Institutional Change, which is charged with conducting an audit of the power structures and analyzing systemic racism and white supremacy culture within the Unitarian Universalist Association, and to then offer recommendations on how to dismantle those systems. You'll hear more about the commission later on in this service. Also in that spring, hundreds of congregations, including this one, participated in what were called white supremacy teach-ins. Organized by UU religious educators of colors, these events interrupted or took a place of a Sunday morning worship service to be more of a workshop for learning, to help all UUs understand what is meant by the term white supremacy and white supremacy culture, and how it relates to the culture of our congregations and our association. And the broad takeaway for me was to understand that saying white supremacy culture operates within Unitarian Universalism is not really a radical or strange thing to say, especially when you pause and remember that white supremacy is endemic to the founding and to the continuation of our whole nation, United States. And so no church, no company, no institution, no religion is free from the impacts of white supremacy culture. Our denomination, just as our nation, has unfinished business. There is pain and hurt. It is messy and difficult work, and there is much to mourn and grieve. But most of all, we mourn the loss of lives. It certainly is the real result of police action and racism in our nation. Please join me now in a spirit of meditation, prayer, and reflection. Great mystery which grounds us and surrounds us. Divine presence known by many names and in many ways. Join us in mourning the lives taken by systemic racism and systematic oppression, by police brutality and white entitlement. We grieve Rayshard Brooks, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade. We mourn each life cut short, specifically and individually, and we mourn also the many that we don't hear about, that don't become the names at the center of the movement for Black lives, but lives that nonetheless had dignity and worth. Spirit of life, fire of commitment, join us in rage at the injustices of our country. Join us in sorrow for all the things we wish had not come to pass. And join us to enjoy for the moments of grace and blessing that persist still in the midst of all. In this community of mutual love and support, we take time each week to lift up the joys and sorrows shared by members of the community. Jim Ferris shares that his older brother, who suffers from Parkinson's disease, just added new medication, and with more energy, he's keeping up his daily walker strolls. Jim also mentions that his wife has been given permission to drive again, which makes both of their lives easier. Linda Snyder's thoughts are with her sister Nancy as she begins chemo tomorrow for her recently diagnosed ovarian cancer. Spirit of life and love, may we find glimpses of you in each other's caring presence and in the still, small voice residing in each of us, calling out for justice. May we be May we be lifted into bold and compassionate and righteous action, in whatever form that may mean for any of us in the midst of this pandemic. Amen, and blessed be. And I now invite you to meditate, to sing, to pray, however you need to, as we move into our pastoral hymn, number 95, There is More Love Somewhere.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
Blessed be. I now invite Suzanne to offer our reading for this morning.
Good morning. Chris Crass, a Unitarian Universalist, organizer for building multicultural community, and a writer promoting anti-racism for white audiences, wrote the following: "To all get free together." To become an anti-racist faith community, the key question for a white majority community is not, how do we get people of color to join our faith? It is instead, how can we make a prolonged, spiritually rooted, engaged commitment to uprooting white supremacy within our community and take ongoing collective action to challenge it in society? Our goal is not to have white people sit alongside a person of color so as to affirm that those white people aren't racist. Our goal is to build and be part of beloved community, united to end structural oppression and unleash collective liberation in our faith communities, schools, neighborhoods, workplaces, and throughout society. Our goal is to join hands across the divisions of racism in our faith and in our communities and affirm the humanity in each other. Our goal is to join our hearts and minds to the tasks of destroying white supremacy in every worldview, policy, law, institution, and governing body of our society. For our faith communities to be places of healing from the nightmare of racism that haunts people of color and white people. For our faith communities to be places of nourishment, sustaining the multiracial struggles of our people to advance economic, racial, and gender justice. For our faith communities to be part of the continual process of working within the movement as part of the journey to end oppression in society. For our faith communities to raise our children of all backgrounds to be freedom fighters and practitioners of liberation values. Our goal is for our faith communities to be spiritually alive, learning from and contributing to liberation cultures and legacies. For our faith communities to be welcome homes for people of all colors, sexualities, classes, ages, abilities, genders, and citizenship status. For our faith community to regularly invite us into and prepare us for courageous action for collective liberation held in loving community for the long haul. May our faith community be active agents in the world to help us all get free together. I really appreciate people who give insight and direction in this hard work. I've often needed it. Like many of you, I'm sure, I've been searching for a path for years now. I was so sad about Trayvon Martin, 2 years later, Michael Brown. I felt the pain of those mothers. I already knew something was systemically wrong, but that was when I really started opening my eyes to 21st century racism. So when our Reverends Wendy and Lynn worked with congregations on their white supremacy teachings and brought it to us, and I was invited to join the small group ministry, Beloved Congregation, I was ready. In that small group, we considered the history of this congregation, our personal history and experiences. We saw where we had not made room for people of color. We considered where we could be more sensitive and open, where we overwhelmed anyone who walked through the door that didn't look like us. How we wanted to be so much in the work for change, but maybe we needed to work on ourselves first. And where we could recognize our privilege and use it to act for justice. It was important work and very helpful. We learned so much about our congregation and ourselves. We talked deeply. We were growing. And still, I didn't go to protests. I didn't wear my Black Lives Matter t-shirt. My discomfort with other white people confronting or judging me was still more powerful than my quest for justice. I remained silent. I don't know how many times I have said, I work at a high poverty Title I school. The students need a lot of help. I've slowly realized, 20 years into my career, how condescending it sounds. Like I somehow have something to give them that they cannot give themselves. I'm helping the inner city children. How white of me. At work, I am surrounded by well-meaning, highly educated, mostly white people. We are missionaries, coming in with our grand ideas of how life can be better, like we somehow have the market cornered on solutions for someone else's neighborhood, someone else's life. At best, we have a savior complex, but we might just be colonizers. But still, I am silent. But I don't want to be a racist. So I read and I read. But still, I am living in my privilege. I don't have to go out to work in this time of pandemic. I have virtually unlimited access to information. I can intellectualize the pain. I don't have to live it every day. I've had 5 students die of violent deaths in the 7 years I've worked in Sacramento. But even though only 40% of our students are Black, 4 of those deaths have been young Black human beings with dreams and promises. But their families cannot sit around and intellectualize it. They don't have the option of deciding when and where they are noticed. They have to assume they are always targeted because this country is racist. The government apparatus like police and schools are racist. I don't want to be silent. I need to learn to not be silent. I wish this could be one of those reflections where there's a moral or a great call to action. But after 8 years of searching and doing the work, I still don't have any answers. So I'm trying to just listen and take direction. I'm not making excuses or trying to take charge. I'm recognizing and reckoning with my privilege and learned racism. Trying to be brave. I'm wearing my BLM shirt now, and I'm willing to talk it out with those who judge. I'm trying to speak up, but only when I'm in Sacramento. I'm still too scared in Placerville. It hurts my soul because I can always just change my shirt.
Thank you, Suzanne, for that moving reflection. Before we move into the offer introduction, I just want to hold space for everything that you shared. Hold some silence for just a moment. For just a breath in and out. Unitarian Universalist congregations are part of an association, but individually we are self-supported. And as such, generosity becomes an important spiritual practice for our congregations. When we offer our time, our talents, and our treasure, we deepen our engagement, and we become part of building the beloved community together. Everything we want to do for justice, for beloved community, requires resources. And as part of our ethic of generosity, we also split our collection plate with a local community organization that is aligned with our values. This month, the Share the Plate recipient is Stand Up Placer, an organization whose mission is to save lives by empowering survivors and educating communities to stand up to domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. To support Stand Up Placer and SFUU today, you can follow the link in the chat Vicky should be posting, or just navigate to our website at mysfuu.org and click Give to SFUU and follow the instructions there. There you can donate to SFUU at any time for our Share the Plate on Sundays or directly to SFUU to pay your pledge. As always, you may mail donations or pledges directly to the church at our 190 Finley Street address. Our offertory music this Sunday is from the band Crispy Watkins and the Crack Willows. They're a new folk Americana band led by a Unitarian Universalist minister and a friend of mine. They offer musical medicine for a hurting world. If you like the song, please check them out at crispywatkins.com or on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, all those places. Crispy writes of the song for our offertory this morning, Tend This Flame. This song comes from the wisdom of my ancestors, the wisdom of our collective, calling us to live our soul's purpose and to each tend the flame we are given. Together, we can transform our world's sickness into health. May this song be a balm to you as the offering is now given and gratefully received.
I was born to tend this flame. Ancestors danced and sang. What seeds now must I sow? To heal a soul. Oh, my love, it's time to know. Oh, my darling. Oh, my darling. Oh, my love, it's time to know. That makes me white takes brown and black lives. Where must my privilege go? Oh, my love, it's time to know. Oh, my darling. Oh, my darling. Oh, my love, it's time to know. To link this chain, roll the clouds and make it rain. What anchor must I hold? Oh, my love, it's time to know. Oh, my darling. Oh, my darling. Oh, my love, it's time to know.
Now, our theme for the month is compassion, and our topic for the day is racial justice. And in case it isn't clear how deeply related these two are, I offer you this quote from Dr. Cornel West, which is the inspiration for the title of our service. Never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. Compassion, often a synonym for selfless, benevolent love for all, is contrasted with specific, passionate love for a specific beloved. Compassion means literally to endure, to undergo, to experience with another or together. It does not mean pity or sympathy, but it truly means the experience and the act of putting ourselves in another's shoes, of feeling their pain, of centering the experiences of others who are suffering and doing something about that suffering. And so it calls us to do something. We are called by compassion to do something about racial injustice in our society. But the entire issue, the whole, like that as a whole category, an issue, is so much larger and so much beyond just the specific sub-issues of policing or mass incarceration. The whole root cause and system of white supremacy is so huge. It's so daunting. What can we hope to do about an issue so large? Where do we start? Where do we put our energy? Certainly there are important things to do to organize and engage with the political process, call your senators, push for national legislation, make sure that your representatives know how you feel about what's going on in our country. But also, I think it's important to recognize that racism, racial inequality, white supremacy culture, these are not simply issues that are out there to be one day fixed by legislators or some other group working on things. Black Lives Matter is not just going to, with enough funding and support and hashtags, be able to fix race in America. Certainly not without much engagement and work on our part and every individual participating. And so it's important to recognize the work to be done within ourselves, within our communities, in our places of work, and yes, even our places of worship. It's sort of a be the change you wish to see in the world kind of thing. There is so much of white supremacy culture rife throughout our entire country, our government, and our culture. I truly do believe that one of the places we can make the most impact and have the most power to make changes that will ripple out and move things forward is in our very own homes, in our very own communities. And so as Unitarian Universalist, as a Unitarian Universalist congregation committed to the inherent worth and dignity of all people, we must not only affirm that Black Lives Matter, but we must take action to dismantle white supremacy culture as it manifests in our congregations. Now, to be clear, this is not a sermon to say anything in particular is racist or problematic in what our congregation does or how we operate. Certainly, at least I am not able to see anything egregious like that from my position of privilege as a white person and as the minister of this congregation. What I am saying is that we have to reckon with the fact that the default setting, what is automatic in both the United States broadly and certainly in Unitarian Universalism, given our history and our lineage from the Puritans, is that default is that which centers and privileges white experience, that which prioritizes white comfort, that which generally makes non-white, those gender expansive, the disabled, indigenous people feel unwelcome and unwanted. Even if nothing was ever said consciously or self-awarely by that normative majority, nothing was intentionally done to that effect, but the effect is still there. And when we realize that this is the default, that white supremacy culture is what exists if we are silent and don't speak up or try to make any changes, then it becomes clear that in order to be not racist, we must actively be anti-racist in ourselves and in our institutions. And that means making a priority of paying attention to how white supremacy culture operates. It means consistently asking ourselves, what are we doing? How might it be affecting people of color and other marginalized folks? And what can we be doing differently? Luckily, we are not totally alone and lost in this work. Remember that Commission on Institutional Change from 2017? Well, their final report came out on Friday. It is entitled Widening the Circle of Concern. They've been working for 3 years, and they're going to, at our General Assembly, which will be in just a few weeks, in 1 week, really, it begins, a little over a week, they'll be offering this report and talking about that at General Assembly, at the annual gathering that will be virtual. But it has also been published already, and so I was reading it yesterday in preparation for this service. This report has a number of recommendations, many of which are for the UUA specifically, that national organization and staff. But it does have a section about congregations, and they lay out many recommendations for congregations, some which will seem easy to implement, others may take time. And all of this report, all of this is a lot to digest. I know this service itself, I'm sure, is a lot to digest. So for now, I simply want to read some of the highlights of their recommendations and observations aimed at congregations, and add a little bit of commentary when appropriate. So here's where I would like the slideshow to begin. Thank you. All right, so here's one of the initial observations, not really a recommendation, but just a statement and observation. Unitarian Universalist Association member congregations must act both as independent bodies and in coordination, in covenant, and in communion with other congregations. We can't do this work alone as congregations, nor as an association without support and buy-in and cooperation from congregations. It takes all of us working together to get us all free. So when I talk about this work and this work being congregationally focused, that doesn't mean, oh, we're just figuring it out on ourselves with the 117 members that we have. We have Grass Valley up the road. We have Sacramento and Davis congregations. We have the Reno congregations in Chico. All those congregations are our friends and fellows and companions in this journey. A second initial observation is that congregations are disconnected from the issues and resources of the association. If this feels like the first that you're hearing about a lot of this, or between this and the sermon that I gave a month ago about top 10 UU moments, that's not uncommon for Unitarian Universalists to, whether they're new or have been around for a while, to not necessarily feel connected and up to date on what is going on from in the association and what the resources available are from the association. And this is a two-way street, right? So the UUA can definitely do more to improve their communication and be consistent and informative to congregations. But at the same time, congregations have to step up and be invested in the association, in the region, the Pacific Western region we're a part of, and in our cluster that I just described. So I understand that this is a time where many of you have so little bandwidth for anything else going on in your life. And I always honor people saying no to invitations. So please hear that loud and clear. But at the same time, please do honestly consider the invitation. If you have any bandwidth to spare, you are invited, and if you are invested in Unitarian Universalism having a flourishing and anti-racist future, please get connected to denominational events, conversations, and issues. The UUA has a Facebook page. Our wonderful UUA president, Susan Frederick Gray, has a Facebook page you can follow. There are email lists. You can just go to the website regularly. And it's still not too late to register for our virtual General Assembly, which will be, I should have the date, it will be beginning the evening of the 24th, and we'll have virtual programming, some live at certain times and some that you can access whenever. Throughout the 24th to the 28th. It is not too late to register for that. You don't even have to register for the whole thing or attend the whole thing if you register for it, but registering gives you the opportunity to engage and hear and learn and participate at whatever level is available to you that week. And hey, if you register and attend, you'll also get to see your minister, that's right, me, as co-chair of the Right Relationship team. So I think that's pretty cool, right? And if you don't know what that team is, attend General Assembly and find out. So another initial observation to stop shamelessly self-promoting myself and get back to the report at hand. Congregations need promising practices, including resources on caucusing to support oppressed and marginalized groups. So this report highly recommends the practice of caucuses of groups with shared identities, gathering for mutual support, learning, and growth. This is especially critical for people of color who are members of UU congregations who may be in a minority and may be dealing with a lot in that position. But there's also a role for white members of congregations to caucus together, or to have caucuses of LGBTQ UUs and straight and cisgendered and cisgendered members, Unitarian Universalists. So there's different ways caucuses can be put together. And in part, the role for, say, a white caucus to gather together is so that they can practice and stumble and ask questions and dig through some of this messy stuff where they're less likely to cause harm to a UU of color by asking them, hey, is this thing, you know, on the up and up, or what's going on here with in terms of, should I do this? Should I appropriate this? Should I not? What should I be doing? It's very helpful to actually have those conversations in white spaces committed to anti-racism. So this is a recommendation I certainly need to do more research and learning about. I have a better sense of what it looks like in a more diverse congregation. I'm less clear of how to move forward in a congregation that is as predominantly white as ours is, but I look forward to further resources from the UUA and working on this. Next in the report came a series of more direct recommendations to congregations. So I will read these out. Appoint someone to be a liaison to the UUA. Ensure that lifespan religious educators, so in our case, Adrian, are focused on building understanding about equity and inclusion. Do basic hospitality role-playing and education each year for those involved with membership and greeting activities, including greeting, membership, ushering, worship planning, refreshment services, etc. Zoom breakout room facilitation, perhaps. Conduct a congregational audit. This commission was an audit on the whole UUA and the whole system and all the congregations, but individual congregations, many of them have done this already, have conducted a sort of racial justice or white supremacy culture audit on their congregation. Put money in your budget for education around anti-oppression practices every year. Put your money where your mouth is. Add a line item for scholarships to attend General Assembly and make them available to those who most need to connect around identity. Black people, Indigenous people, people of color, LGBTQ folks, and youth and young adults. And form justice partnerships with organizations led by the most affected by the issues and follow their lead. Create partnerships and relationships in the communities. Next slide is some closing observations. And this one is one I think is so important. Covenant and commitment, not comfort, should be the binding fabrics of UU congregations and other communities. So I've actually preached on this a bit in the year that I've been here, and you will almost certainly hear me continue to bring this up, this idea that we are covenantal and commitment, and that isn't always comfortable, isn't always easy, and comfort is not the highest priority for us. The work that we are called to do as UUs within our congregation and without is not going to be comfortable all the time. That's not the point of religious community, and it's not the point of service in the name of justice, equity, and compassion. And the final observation is that congregations that choose to engage, to increase equity, inclusion, and diversity are leading the way into the future. The commission did their research. They have the numbers. Congregations that are multicultural and anti-oppressive are growing and thriving. Congregations that aren't are having trouble. Now, that's a reality that we must face, but it's also not the reason that we should undertake the work. We can end the slideshow at this point. We are called to this work by our Unitarian Universalist principles, by our values and our convictions as religious people. Whatever our theologies or atheologies, however we understand ourselves to be members of this beautiful, imperfect, but potentially oh so expansive and revolutionary faith, we are called to work together to get all of us free together as soon as possible. Amen, and blessed be. And please join me now in the closing hymn, 298, Wake Now My Senses.
Keep with love.
May our senses be awakened by the earth calling out for justice and sustainability. May our reason be awakened and reach out to the new, not resisting or holding on to existing comfort, but boldly moving forward into the future. May our compassion be awakened to decenter our focus from our own privileges and to recenter those most impacted by racism and inequality. May our vision of ministry clear be awakened, pulled from slumber and stagnation by sense, reason, and compassion, and may we journey together in covenant and in diversity and in relationship, widening the circle of concern and compassion into a future where all may freely flourish. Please raise your hands together for our words to extinguish our chalice. As we go forth, may we carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Blessed be.